Robin Blakeman, I go back quite a while ago. Actually, we live on the opposite end of the state. She's right up against Kentucky, Ohio, and I'm on the other end. I'm a couple miles from Virginia line. The whole state, just in springtime, is absolutely gorgeous. As the leaves come out on the trees, the blossoms, everything greens up. It is stunning. To me, where I live, the first week or two of June is the prettiest place in the world. Except there's some places that aren't pretty. Just to briefly, what mountaintop removal is the traditional way of coal mining was, well, after the pick, shovel, mule days, is to dig basically tunnels into the seam of the coal. Coal is in seams. You have a layer of rock, maybe 20, 30, 50 feet, and then you have a coal seam anywhere from 18 inches maybe to, they used to have 10 or 12 foot seams, but most of those are mined out. You go in there and you go sometimes for miles digging out that coal. But they began as explosives came on the scene and bulldozers and heavy equipment, they began to do surface mining, strip mining. Some of it was kind of like peeling the core of the outside of an apple, if you want to think of that. But then they began to just blast the whole thing apart. And so they would drill down into a mountain, explode it with a mixture of fuel oil and basically kind of like a fertilizer, sort of the same stuff that Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma, the federal building there. And they blow up the mountain, and then they scoop up the coal, and then the rubble, about maybe 3% of what they blow up is coal, and then they scoop that up and haul it off, and then the rest of it's usually thrown down into a valley. Mountains and valley. Between mountains is a valley, and they just push it down there, burying the beginnings of streams. This blasting puts out silica and also these chemicals that create a very micro, much smaller than 2.5, that go right into the bloodstream, right through the placental barrier, right through the brain barrier and whatever, and creates irritation and inflammation in the circulatory system, which creates heart disease or causes that, and birth defects if going through the placental barrier and so forth and so on. The last thing I just want to say at this point is that our Christians for the Mountains, we use the scripture for our motto, Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord, belongs to God, and everything in it. I mean, it's sort of God's property. We give and then you go into Genesis 2:15-17, where it basically says, God is saying to humanity, I give you every green leaf to food. I give you, this is there, you can eat it, but and you have to protect it, and you have to care for it, nurture it. And then the last verse, 17, right after that, he talked about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, basically saying there's limits. You're not God. God is God. We're not. And we have to recognize there's certain boundaries that we need to respect. And I think that's one thing that's happening today with the climate issues. We're not respecting the boundaries. We're not serving the planet. We're plundering the planet. We're exploiting it, whether it's mountaintop removal, whether it's, just using the atmosphere and the water as sewers. So we have a responsibility.
I find that the people are always confused about West Virginians even wanting to engage in this kind of work, because you have some stereotypes out there of who West Virginians are and what they believe in, that kind of thing. I have 8 generations of roots in this state. My family members go back to shortly after the Revolutionary War, coming to this part of the country. It was then known as Virginia and also Indian Territory. So there's good and bad in my heritage there. But what I have always valued about my heritage is the fact that people have been self-sufficient and have valued the land and the location that they're in, and love the beauty of it, and just know how to raise gardens and store apples in the wintertime and that kind of thing. When I was growing up, I'm a cradle to now Presbyterian. I had the privilege of going to a summer camp in the hills near where Alan lives, along the Greenbrier and Bluestone rivers, called Bluestone Camp and Conference Center. And this was an important part of my formation in terms of environmental respect and just love for the beauty of nature and just and the ability to get out in it. I learned that backpacking was not a bad thing during this time, and did a lot of it, and some canoeing and kayaking. And it's just, it has been a part of the core of who I am ever since being at that summer camp. And I value that a lot. It took, however, going away from this place and then coming back before I really woke up to some of the, as Alan called them, ugly places in West Virginia. I really, it blew by me, or I just didn't recognize the problems of strip mining and coal-fired power plants and a lot of other things when I was growing up. Those just seemed like part of the landscape. But when I went away and lived in Louisville, going to seminary, and in Ohio near Dayton for a while, and then came back, I came back with a different perspective. And that was that I could see the damage that these things were doing. It actually took a coal mine company encroaching on some of my family's property and damaging a portion of that property, and my parents having to engage in a lawsuit with the big guns from the coal company before I really, really woke up to the problems of this. But when I did, I was fully and wholeheartedly against the exploitation of the land and the people that was happening in my home state. I've been involved in cemetery preservation work, and that may seem tangential, but it really wasn't, because as Alan mentioned, when the mountains are blown up to get at the coal, a lot of times what happens is the fill from those mountains are just dumped in the valleys below or on a different part of the property. And a lot of people in West Virginia bury their family members and their community members in private family cemeteries or small community cemeteries. And those were getting decimated or buried, disappearing. And there wasn't really good laws on preserving them. So the problem is in West Virginia, as Alan has mentioned, and as somebody else alluded to, is that, a lot of people who come here for the resources. And we are what I refer to as a resource colony. And we have been for decades, if not hundreds of years. We are an extraction state. Most of the minerals and wealth go out of this state. They do not stay here.